Hi, I'm Rachel Monroe, and I believed marriage meant safety, partnership, and love. I thought the vows we took meant something, that the home we built together was a sanctuary. But the day I saw my husband smirk over a steaming cup of coffee, I realized I was wrong. His plan to end me didn't just fail, it backfired in a way he never could have imagined. This is the story of how the man I loved tried to erase me, and how a simple cup of coffee revealed a truth more bitter than anything I could have ever swallowed. Before we dive into this, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and tell me in the comments where are you watching from. The morning air in our suburban Chicago home was cold. It was the kind of chill that sinks into your bones, the kind that makes you pull your robe tighter and crave the warmth of a hot drink. I sat at our polished kitchen island, watching my husband, Daniel, move around the kitchen. He was making coffee, just like he did every morning. But this morning felt different. There was a strange energy in the room, a quiet hum of something wrong. He placed a cup of coffee in front of me. It was in my favorite mug, the blue one with a tiny chip on the rim. Steam curled from the dark liquid, carrying the rich, familiar scent. But it was his face that made me pause. He was smiling, but it wasn't his usual smile. This one was tight, a strange, knowing smirk that didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were fixed on me, watching, waiting. My gut twisted into a knot. It was a primal feeling, a warning bell clanging in the back of my mind. Why was he looking at me like that? It was just coffee. I told myself I was being paranoid, that maybe I was just tired. "Here you go," he said, his voice a little too cheerful. "Drink up. It'll warm you." I wrapped my cold hands around the mug, but I didn't lift it. I just looked at him, trying to understand the expression on his face. He leaned against the counter, his arms crossed, that same unnerving grin plastered on his lips. He looked like a man waiting for a punchline, a secret joke that only he understood. Just then, his mother, Carol, walked into the kitchen. She was visiting for the weekend, a whirlwind of cheerful energy and floral perfume. "Oh, coffee. Perfect," she chirped, bustling over to the island. "I am freezing this morning." Before I could react, before Daniel could say a word, she reached out. Her hand, adorned with a simple gold wedding band, closed around the blue mug in front of me. "This looks perfect, honey," she said to Daniel, but she smiled at me. "You don't mind, do you, Rachel? I'll get the next one." She lifted the cup and took a deep, satisfying sip, and in that moment, Daniel's world stopped. The smirk on his face vanished. It was replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated horror. His eyes widened, his face went pale, and his jaw went slack. He stared at his mother, at the blue mug in her hands, as if he were watching a bomb about to detonate. I saw his hand, the one resting on the counter, begin to tremble. He didn't say a word. He couldn't. He just watched her drink the coffee that had been meant for me. I slowly set down my own untouched cup, the one he had poured for himself. My heart was pounding against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear and confusion. Something was terribly wrong. I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my core, that I had just dodged something meant to destroy me. Carol had taken my place, and my husband was terrified. The past didn't hit me all at once. It came back in flashes, in painful, sharp memories that I had pushed down for years. As I sat in the sterile, white waiting room of the hospital, the scent of antiseptic burning my nose, I finally allowed myself to see the truth. Daniel's cruelty hadn't started this morning with a cup of coffee. It had been a slow poison, dripped into my life, year after year. I remembered the night I got a promotion at the marketing firm where I worked. I came home buzzing with excitement, holding a bottle of champagne. I told him the news, my voice full of pride. He'd looked up from his laptop, his expression flat. "Marketing," he'd said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "That's nice, honey. All that fluff and color finally paid off." The words stung, turning my triumph into something small and silly. I put the champagne in the fridge, and we never opened it. Then there was the money. He insisted on managing all our finances. He said he was better with numbers, that it would be easier that way. At first, it felt like he was taking care of me, but soon I had to ask for money for groceries, for gas, for a new pair of shoes. He would sigh, pulling out his wallet as if it were a great burden. "Another pair of shoes, Rachel? Do you really need them?" He made me feel like a child asking for an allowance, my financial independence slowly eroding until I felt completely powerless. I was a professional with a good salary, yet I felt poor. The isolation was subtle, too. My friends would call to make plans, and Daniel would always have a reason why we couldn't go. "We have that thing with my parents," he'd say. Or, "Rachel's had a long week, she just wants to rest." Slowly, the calls became less frequent. When my best friend Sarah came over one evening, Daniel was cold and distant. He answered her questions in single syllables and spent the whole night looking at his phone. After she left, he turned to me and said, "She's a little loud, isn't she?" He made me feel ashamed of the people I loved, until I started making excuses myself. I built the walls he wanted, brick by brick, until I was alone with him inside them. He mocked me in front of his family, always framing it as a joke. At a Christmas dinner, I mentioned a book I was reading. Daniel laughed and said to the table, "Rachel and her little books. She thinks she's an intellectual." Everyone chuckled, and I forced a smile, but my face burned with humiliation. He was painting a picture of me for the world. I was silly, irresponsible, and a little dumb. And the worst part was, after years of hearing it, a part of me had started to believe him. I had ignored every red flag. I had told myself it was just his way, that he was stressed from work, that he loved me underneath it all. I had made excuses for the man who was slowly erasing me, piece by piece. But sitting in that hospital, listening to the quiet beeping of machines down the hall, I knew I could no longer make excuses. The man who called me his wife had looked at me with a chilling smirk as I prepared to drink a cup of coffee. That wasn't stress. That wasn't a joke. That was something much, much darker. Hours after she drank the coffee, Carol collapsed. One moment she was laughing at a story on the television. The next she was on the floor, gasping for breath, her body convulsing. The paramedics arrived in a flurry of motion and urgent voices. Daniel stood back, his face a mask of shock, but his eyes were darting around, calculating. At the hospital, he put on a masterful performance. He held my hand, his grip tight and clammy. He spoke to the doctors with a voice full of fake concern, playing the part of the devoted son. But I was watching him. I saw the way his jaw clenched when a nurse asked what Carol had eaten or drunk that morning. I saw the flicker of panic in his eyes. A young doctor with a kind face came to speak with us in the waiting room. "We're doing everything we can for your mother," she told Daniel. "Her symptoms are severe. It looks like she may have ingested some kind of toxin. We're running a full toxicology panel to see if we can identify it." At the word toxicology, Daniel's facade cracked. His face went ashen, a deathly white that had nothing to do with grief. He dropped my hand as if it had burned him. He couldn't fake it anymore. The fear was real now. He wasn't afraid for his mother. He was afraid for himself. He was afraid of being caught. And in that precise moment, the last piece of the puzzle clicked into place in my mind. The sick feeling in my stomach wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was certainty. The coffee had been poisoned, and it had been meant for me. He had tried to kill me. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The man I had shared a bed with, the man I had promised to love in sickness and in health, had tried to murder me. The realization was so monstrous, so overwhelming, that I thought I might faint. But I didn't. Instead, a strange, cold calm washed over me. The fear was still there, but underneath it, something new was taking root. Resolve. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't confront him and give him the chance to lie his way out of it, or worse, to finish the job. He thought I was weak. He thought I was the silly, clueless woman he had worked so hard to create. He was wrong. I looked at my husband, the man who was now a stranger, and I made a silent promise to myself. I would not be his victim. I would be his undoing. That night, after we got home from the hospital, Daniel went straight to bed, claiming exhaustion. I waited until I heard the soft, even rhythm of his breathing, and then I slipped out of the room. I went to his office, the one he always kept locked. I found the spare key we kept hidden in a vase and quietly let myself in. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. I started searching. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I knew I would recognize it when I saw it. I opened his filing cabinet, my fingers scanning the labels, mortgages, taxes, car titles. And then I saw it. A folder labeled Life Insurance. My heart hammered in my chest. I pulled it out and opened it on his desk. There were 2 policies. One for him, a modest one we had taken out years ago, and one for me. It was new, dated only 3 months prior. I scanned the details, my blood running cold. It was a massive policy, worth far more than our assets combined. He had insisted I sign the papers, telling me it was just a formality, something responsible adults did. He'd brushed off my questions, making me feel foolish for even asking. And there, at the bottom of the page, was the name of the sole beneficiary, Daniel Monroe. If I died, he would be a very rich man. I took pictures of every page with my phone. Then, I remembered the arguments, the little comments he'd make when he was angry. "This would all be so much easier without you," he'd muttered once after a fight about money. Another time, he'd looked at me and said, "You'd be better off gone." I had dismissed them as words spoken in anger. Now, I saw them for what they were, threats. Next, I logged into our online banking portal. I started scrolling through months of credit card statements. It was mostly normal things, gas, groceries, restaurants. But then I found it. A charge from 2 weeks ago for over $200 from an online chemical supply store. It was a name I didn't recognize. I screenshotted the transaction, my mind racing. This was it. This was the proof. He hadn't just thought about it. He had planned it. He had purchased the weapon. I put the folder back exactly where I found it, locked the office door and returned the key to the vase. I slipped back into bed, lying perfectly still next to the man who wanted me dead. He was sleeping peacefully, oblivious. I did not sleep. I lay awake all night, staring into the darkness, the evidence burning on my phone, my quiet resolve hardening into steel. The game had changed, and I was going to win. The next morning, I called my best friend, Sarah. She wasn't just my friend. She was a detective with the Chicago Police Department. I met her at a small cafe far from my neighborhood, my hands wrapped around a cup of tea I couldn't drink. "Rachel, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, her voice full of concern. My own voice was barely a whisper. "Something has happened, Sarah. Something terrible." I told her everything. I told her about the coffee, about Daniel's reaction, about his mother in the hospital. I told her about the years of emotional abuse, the things I had never admitted to anyone, not even myself. Then I showed her the photos on my phone, the insurance policy, the credit card statement. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with every word. She looked at the photos, her detective's eyes missing nothing. When I finished, she reached across the table and put her hand over mine. "Rach," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "You did the right thing by coming to me. You need to be very, very careful." She laid out a plan. We couldn't go to the police officially just yet. Daniel would deny everything. And without the toxicology report, it was my word against his. But we could start building a case quietly. Sarah told me what we needed. First, the official medical reports from the hospital. As next of kin, Daniel would get them, but Sarah had ways of getting information. Second, we had to link that credit card purchase to the specific poison. "Stay in the house. Act normal," she instructed me. "Do not let him know you suspect anything. Your safety is the most important thing right now. Pretend you believe his story that his mom just got a stomach bug. Can you do that?" I nodded, even though the thought of it made my skin crawl. "I can." Over the next week, I lived a double life. To Daniel, I was the worried, supportive wife. I visited Carol in the hospital with him, holding his hand and offering empty words of comfort. I cooked his dinner. I asked about his day. I slept beside him in our bed. But every night, after he fell asleep, I was on the phone with Sarah, piecing together the evidence. Sarah worked her magic. She confirmed that the toxicology report showed Carol had been poisoned with a rare, fast-acting substance that was difficult to trace unless you knew what to look for. And the online chemical supply store? The one from the credit card statement? They sold that exact substance. The final piece was the surveillance footage. Sarah's contacts managed to secure the video from a shipping store near Daniel's office. On the day the package was delivered, the footage was grainy but clear. Daniel, walking into the store, signing for a small box and walking out. We had him. Every piece of the puzzle was there, laid out in a neat, undeniable pattern. The motive was the insurance money. The weapon was the poison he'd bought online. The proof was on the surveillance tape. One evening, I decided to test him. Carol was stable but still very weak in the hospital. Daniel was sitting in the living room watching TV, looking relaxed for the first time in days. He thought he had gotten away with it. I walked in and sat down across from him, my heart pounding, the folder of printed evidence hidden behind a cushion on the chair. I kept my voice calm and casual. "You know, I was just thinking about that morning," I said. "It was so strange. Why were you watching your mom so closely when she drank that coffee? You looked terrified." His head snapped up. His relaxed posture vanished. "What are you talking about?" he snapped, his voice sharp and defensive. "I was worried. My mother was visiting. Of course I was watching her." "It didn't look like worry, Daniel," I said softly, pushing a little. Harder. "It looked like fear." That's when he lost control. He shot up from the couch, his face contorted with rage. "You're being ridiculous. You're paranoid, Rachel. You're always overthinking everything, making things up in your head. Maybe you're the one with the problem." His aggression was the final, absolute confirmation. He wasn't just lying. He was trying to turn it around on me, to make me feel crazy. It was the same tactic he had used for years, but this time, it didn't work. I didn't flinch. I just looked at him, my expression unreadable. I let his anger wash over me, and I stayed, silent. Behind my back, my fingers tightened on the folder of evidence. He had no idea that his world was about to come crashing down. The day of the trial was overcast, the Chicago sky a flat, unforgiving gray. I walked into the courtroom feeling a strange sense of calm. The fear was gone, replaced by a quiet, steady resolve. Daniel was already there, sitting beside his expensive lawyer. He caught my eye and gave me a small, smug smile. He still thought he could win. He still thought he was smarter than everyone else. But his confidence began to crumble as the prosecutor laid out the case. First, the doctor from the hospital took the stand, explaining in precise medical terms the nature of the poison found in Carol's system. He described how it would have been fatal if she had consumed the entire cup. Next, a financial analyst detailed Daniel's mounting debts and the massive life insurance policy he had taken out on me. The motive was no longer a theory. It was a number printed on a page. $2 million. Daniel's face paled. Then came the credit card statements and the surveillance video. The courtroom was silent as we watched the grainy footage of my husband signing for the package that contained the poison. The smug smile was completely gone now, replaced by a sheen of sweat on his forehead. Finally, it was my turn to take the stand. I walked past Daniel, not looking at him. I sat down, folded my hands in my lap, and looked at the jury. I told them everything. I spoke in a clear, steady voice, describing the morning with the coffee, his strange behavior, and the years of subtle cruelty that led up to it. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I simply told the truth. The prosecutor asked his final question. "Mrs. Monroe, why do you believe your husband did this?" I finally turned and looked directly at Daniel. His eyes were wide with panic. He was no longer the confident, controlling man who had dominated my life. He was small, and he was afraid. He thought I was worthless, I said, my voice ringing with a strength I never knew I had. He spent years making me believe I was nothing. Without him, he thought he could erase me, collect the money, and start a new life. Instead, I paused, letting the words hang in the air. He erased himself. The most painful part of the trial was when Carol took the stand. She had recovered, but she was frail, a shadow of the vibrant woman she once was. She walked slowly, aided by a cane. She sat in the witness box, tears streaming down her face, and looked at her only son. "He was my boy," she whispered, her voice cracking. "My sweet boy." She recounted the morning of the poisoning, how her son had watched her drink the coffee without a word of warning. She testified that he had visited her in the hospital, crying and telling her he loved her, all while knowing he was the one who had put her there. Her testimony sealed his fate. It was the ultimate betrayal, a mother forced to condemn her own child to save the life of the woman he had tried to kill. The jury didn't take long. When they came back, the verdict was guilty on all counts. Daniel sat stone-faced, his jaw clenched, as the judge sentenced him to prison. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at his mother. He just stared straight ahead as his life ended. I walked, out of the courthouse and into the cool afternoon air. I was no longer the silenced wife, the woman who made excuses, the victim in a story written by someone else. I was a survivor. I had chosen truth over fear, and in doing so, I had found my voice. I rebuilt my life from the ground up. I sold the house in the suburbs, the one with the polished kitchen island and the ghosts in every room. I moved into a small apartment in the city with a big window overlooking the lake. Some days, I just sit and watch the water, the endless expanse of blue reminding me that the world is so much bigger than the prison he had built for me. I am free. It's a freedom I never knew I was missing. It's in the small things. Buying a pair of shoes without asking permission, having my friends over for dinner, reading a book without being mocked. My life is quiet now, but it is my own. He wanted to end me with a cup of coffee. He thought he could pour my life away like a bitter drink, but I survived. I drank freedom instead. If you've ever trusted the wrong person, let this story remind you. Silence is power until the truth is ready to speak. Drop a comment, like, and subscribe for more stories where betrayal meets justice.